Today's lecture is supported by the Locke Irwin Fund. Alfreda Locke Irwin served as editor of the Chautauquan Daily for 15 years and later was Chautauqua's official historian. President Dr. Daniel Braddon awarded her the President's Medal, the highest honor bestowed by the institution. Forrest Irwin, her husband, was also deeply involved at Chautauqua, particularly with the CLSC and the United Methodist House, and as an avid lawn bowler. Several generations of their family continue to enjoy Chautauqua, and I know a number of their daughters and grandchildren most likely are here in the audience today. We thank the Locke Irwin family for their support, as we thank all of your families who support the Chautauqua experience. We are joined this morning by a pioneering researcher in the science of laughter, Dr. Sophie Scott. As Deputy Director of the University's College London's Institute of Cognitive Neuroscience, Dr. Scott examines comedy from a scholarly perspective. Her work as professor of cognitive neuroscience explores the neurological basis of communication and studies both speech and vocalized emotion. Dr. Scott has been recognized as a Wellcome Trust Senior Research Fellow in Basic Biomedical Science, and she has contributed to over 150 scientific articles and publications. Dr. Scott is also highly regarded for her public engagement. She has contributed to the BBC Radio 4 program, The Life Scientific, and has performed as a stand-up comedian with UCL's Bright Club. Among many recognitions, Dr. Scott is a member of the British Psychological Society, the Society for Neuroscience, and she was elected a Fellow of the Academy of Medical Sciences in 2012. She received her bachelor's degree from Polytechnic of Central London and earned a PhD in cognitive science from the school where she now works, University College London. She is joined here at Chautauqua by her partner, Tom Manley, and their son, Hector John Scott Manley. We welcome them as we now welcome Dr. Sophie Scott to this platform on her first visit to Chautauqua.
Thank you very much for this amazingly kind invitation. Thank you, Jeff, for that lovely introduction, and thank you for the sponsorship of this lecture. I just have to start by acknowledging how strange this is for me. Nobody in my family is an academic. My father never understood what it meant to have a PhD. He sold carpets. He could care less about a PhD. The only thing he ever thought was good about my job was that I gave talks to audiences, and he would always say, "How many people, Sophie? How many?" He'd have been pleased. So I'm going to talk about the science of laughter this morning, and I'd like to start with a short clip. And before we play the clip, I want to just explain a little bit about it to you. It's from a Radio 4 BBC program where two men are broadcasting live and they're talking about cricket. Cricket is hard to explain. It's a little bit like baseball with more tea. I think people drink more tea. And the only thing you need to know about this clip is that there are wickets in cricket, which are a bit like bases in baseball, only you're not supposed to knock them over, okay? So this is relevant. The other thing that you need to know about this clip is that the BBC greatly dislikes sports commentators showing emotion in their voices. it's considered to be very bad form. So I'd like you to listen to this clip, and we're going to listen out for something that goes a bit wrong. So if I could have the clip, please.
35 minutes, hit a 4 over the wicketkeepers. Beggars, for goodness sake, stop it.
Now, what was happening there was he was showing some emotion. He was showing a little bit of laughter. And that's what I'm going to talk about this morning, and I'm just going to use that as my example. So there are 7 important lessons that we can take away from the science of laughter that listening to people trying to broadcast while desperately trying not to laugh can tell us a bit about. The first lesson is that laughter always wins. The man in that recording did not want to laugh. He got in trouble for laughing. The BBC does not like people laughing. But what's laughter? Laughter is actually an example of what's called a non-verbal expression of emotion. And it's like a scream of fear, or a growl of anger, or a disgusted ugh sound. It's more like an animal call than it is like speech. And one of the big ways that it's very different from speech is, in fact, how we breathe. So what we're all doing right now is we're breathing what's called metabolically. That means breathing to stay alive. Don't stop, okay? Critical. Really need to keep you all breathing through the next 40 minutes or so. And to do this, what you do is you take the rib cage and the muscles between your ribs pull the rib cage up and out by contracting. This causes air to flow into your lungs. You then relax the muscles back. The air comes out again. So you get this cycle of air coming in and out. Very important. Don't stop doing it. As soon as we start talking, we breathe completely differently. So when I breathe to speak, I take a breath in, and then I use those same muscles to produce a very finely controlled flow of air out through my voice box. And if I keep speaking without taking another breath, you'll start to hear that those same intercostal muscles between my ribs start to have to work really, really hard. And in the end, I run out of air altogether. Now, you're probably thinking, that's interesting, Sophie. Why did you do that? We're the only animal that can do that. We're the only animal that can use our rib cage in this way to produce this finely controlled flow of air. All of human speech and song and voices rests on this breath control. So we're breathing to stay alive, we breathe for speech, and then laughter comes along. And what laughter does is it takes those same muscles and it makes them do single large contractions. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. And each of those squeezes just forces air out, and you get a laugh. Ha, ha, ha. It's a really primitive way of making a sound. It really is like an animal call. You could just be jumping up and down on someone's chest. Don't, but you could. It'd have the same effect. Now, what we don't understand is why, in terms of brains, if there is a competition between breathing metabolically, breathing for speech, and laughing, laughter always wins. It will stop you breathing. It will stop you speaking. It's just squeezing air out of you. It is trying to kill you. It is a relatively dangerous activity. And it's probably not irrelevant that it's more like an animal call than like speech, because we are not the only animals that laugh. Humans laugh, other apes laugh, gorillas, chimpanzees, orangutans. It's quite easy with them because it looks and it sounds like laughter. There's a beautiful clip on YouTube of the late comedian Robin Williams meeting the signing gorilla, Coco, who she really humorlessly sort of goes, signs to be tickled, tickle me. And he has a go. It's hard. It's really hard to tickle gorillas. They've got really thick skin. Really got to get in there. And when he manages it, it's like the sun coming out. You just see laughter. It's clearly, unmissably laughter. But people have even described laughter in animals more distantly related to humans. So laughter has been described in rats. You're probably thinking, how would you know? A fantastic scientist who sadly recently died from the US, Panksepp, was doing beautiful studies looking at rat vocalizations. And to hear rat vocalizations, you need to take the pitch of their little squeaks and lower it down so we can hear it. And when they did this, they noticed that rats make a very specific sound when they're playing with each other. And this probably may or may not be nice news for you, but rats are highly social little vermin, and they like to play. They make a sound. And the scientists wanted to know, is that laughter? So they're good scientists. They put on their gloves, put their hands in the cage, and started tickling the rats. The rats make the same sound. Now, that could, in theory, still be the rat saying, stop it, I don't like it. So what they did was they'd get the same rat, used to being tickled every day by the same scientist. And then what you'll find, if you put your hand into the cage, even if you don't tickle the rat will make that sound as it kind of runs around trying to get you to tickle him. And apparently, if the same scientist tickles the same rat every day, the rat makes the sound when the scientist comes into the lab in the morning. No one's normally that glad to see scientists in the morning, so we like that story. So finally, on this point about laughter winning, the thing that is interesting about laughter in humans and in other animals is that it has these roots actually in tickling. Across the board, where you find commonality amongst laughter, it's when babies are tickled, normally by their parents, and also in play. And all mammals play. It's a really important part of juvenile development. And some mammals, like humans and dogs and otters, continue playing throughout their whole lives. Play is really important to show that you're playing. There's a play face, kind of a loose, open, happy smile. When there's a sound, it's laughter. And in fact, dogs have another thing. When dogs do this, it means everything after this is a game. I might growl, but I'm not cross at you, because this is play. Panksepp, the scientist who studied the rats, said, at its heart, laughter is an invitation to play. I'm going to come back to that. Something else that you can hear from clips of people laughing is that laughter does not happen when we're on our own. Laughter wants company. We are 30 times more likely to laugh if there is somebody else with us than if we are on our own. And we will laugh more if we know those people and we like those people. It's primed as a behavior by other people being around us. What this means in practice is that human beings laugh most when we're in conversation, because that's what we do when we're with other people. That's where laughter lives. This makes it quite different to a lot of other emotional expressions, which can happen regardless of where you are. So, a couple of years ago, we had a mouse somewhere in our flat, and I was in on my own, and I thought it ran over my foot, and I screamed. I screamed loud enough and long enough that I had time to think, I don't know why I'm screaming. I'm not scared of mice. There's no one here. I mean, there's literally no point to this behavior, but that's emotions. They will just come out of you. Now, I'm lucky enough to live in a part of the world where we don't scream in terror or make disgusted sounds or growl with anger very often, although if Brexit carries on at this rate, it's all up for grabs, actually. Really large masses. The really important thing about laughter is that it's living in these interactions. You can find yourself laughing on your own. I'm not saying it never happens, but it primarily happens when you're with other people. It's an emotion, but it lives in social interactions. This leads me on to the third lesson about laughter, which is laughter leads to laughter. Laughter primes laughter. You are much more likely to laugh if you are already laughing. And that's because laughter is contagious. In that clip I played you before, he keeps saying, "Oh, Aggers, do stop it." Meaning, stop laughing, because I'm only laughing because you're laughing. Really, and you're just setting each other off. And this is quite an interesting class of behaviors. Most other emotions don't work this way. You can catch the experience of an emotion from somebody, because that's what emotions do. If I stand here and make disgusted sounds, you'll likely feel a bit sick, but you probably won't start going, "Ugh," along with me. You don't have this behavioral contagion. We do have behavioral contagion for some other things we do. So we can catch a laugh from somebody, even if we have no idea why they are laughing. We can also catch a yawn from somebody. We catch coughing from people. We catch blinking from other people. Most of the blinks you do are because you are copying other people blinking. Let's just leave that out there. And you're much more likely to catch these behaviors from someone you know than someone you don't know. So that's because it's affiliative. These contagious behaviors, like laughter and yawning and blinking, are things we do to sort of show in a low-level way to the people we know that we know them. I got your back. I'm right here, laughing and yawning with you. Interestingly, we're not the only animal that does this. Dogs will catch a yawn from a human, but only a human they know. And chimpanzees will catch a yawn from any human, because they want to be our friends, I think. So you're seeing something which has got this behavioral priming, and it's affiliative. The next lesson about laughter is that we need to learn what laughter means. So when babies are born, human babies don't laugh at birth. They start to laugh at around 3 to 4 months, normally associated with tickling. There is one other behavior that makes human babies laugh, which you don't find in other mammals, and that's peekaboo. So we're not exactly the same as other animals. Interestingly, if you look at babies growing up, they very quickly recognize the importance of laughter. So long before babies are verbal or able in any way to engage in sort of conversation with parents, they use laughter in a very nuanced way to try and, well, for example, make their parents laugh. They know laughter matters, and they'll do things just to make their parents laugh. Long before they can say anything, they'll be performing things to do laughter, to get laughter going. And what you can actually see is even before babies are around this age, toddlers, again, not really able to talk, will use laughter, their parents' laughter, to assess what a situation means. So there are beautiful experiments from the University of Sheffield where they put toddlers in a situation where someone starts behaving strangely. So the experimenter will be standing there going, boop, 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 boop. And there's a baby and her mum. And the baby looks at the woman going, boop, boop, who's keeping a straight face somehow. And then the baby looks at her mum, And the mum's been told, don't react. And the baby continues with this, boop, boop. Keeps looking at her mum, tries a few laughs, and then, okay, that's not what we're doing. Babies will actually use the fact that their parents laughing or not to work out if a situation is dangerous, or is it okay, is it fun, are we playing here? So well in advance of language, you've got laughter in place as something babies are understanding as being very socially important. Interestingly, babies don't show that contagious behavior around laughter. So what we see in the contagion, joining in when you hear somebody else laugh, even if you don't know why they're laughing, babies don't do that. If you look at a baby laughing, the parent will join in. The baby won't laugh if the parent laughs. We actually teach babies contagious laughter. And I can certainly remember when I was about 3 or 4, I was young, coming into the room and finding my parents absolutely hysterical. They were just helpless with laughter. They were lying on the floor. They'd laughed so much. And what they were doing was remembering the lyrics to a song. Now, you have to forgive me. I do appreciate that the British have a very refined sense of humour. But it was a song about what you should and shouldn't do in toilets on trains. Passengers will please refrain from passing water while the train... It's hilarious, obviously. But the point was, they were laughing, and I wanted in. I can remember sitting next to them going, ha, 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 and I had no idea. I had not a clue about how very funny the toilet song was. The point, there was the shared laughter, and I wanted in on that. And I hadn't really learned how to do it. I was still learning how to laugh contagiously. And this behavioral contagion is something that we learn and something that we develop. But it's not the only thing that we learn and we develop about laughter. Because as we get older, we also start to learn how to use laughter in a complex and nuanced way. If you look at how people use conversational laughter, they're very often using it to deal with quite complex aspects of interaction, even quite transient ones. So this is something children don't normally understand. We're probably all familiar with a child who tells a joke, expects you to laugh, and then tells you the exact same joke again. Come on, I want the laughter. It doesn't quite work that way. And I can remember being at a party for the friend of my son. My son was 5, 6, and he'd gone to the birthday party, and he only knew the birthday boy. He didn't know any of the other boys. They all went to the same school, rather posh school. And at a certain point at tea, the other boys started to laugh at my son because they didn't know him, and they could laugh at him. Look, you're doing something very funny with your sandwich. And what was awful was he didn't realize they were laughing at him. And he was laughing along, like, you guys. I mean, obviously, we, his parents, understood that these vile brats were laughing at our son. And, rather than actually have one of us attack one of the other parents, we were very mature and left the party. The point was, he understood that there was laughter. He just didn't see at all. And it was almost worse for us that he didn't understand that he was being laughed at. So you've got this very complex behavior that children have to learn to navigate. And what we're finding in our data is that if you look at people's ability to understand social laughter, that kind of laughter that's used in a complex way, children who are 5 just can't tell laughter apart. They hear laughter. You get better and better and better through adolescence, but you don't peak in your performance at spotting social laughter until you're in early middle age. Performance does not peak until people are in their late 30s, early 40s, because you can only learn about it in social interactions. There is no other way for you to find out about how laughter is used socially. The only other human behavior that I've seen have this property of a slow development, peaking in early middle age, and then staying pretty good. Lots of other things, they don't stay so good with age. Laughter, it's there. The only other thing that looks like this is what gets called emotional intelligence, measures of empathy, understanding, being able to work out what somebody else needs. So probably what we're thinking about with laughter actually is something that's tapping in to that really important nuanced use of how we will use emotions in interactions to sort of understand why people are doing things and to help work out what's going on around us. And without that, it can be confusing. A good example of nuanced laughter, and we're always looking for this, a few years ago, there was a press conference when Boris Yeltsin had been over in the US, I think at Camp David, and he'd been working with Bill Clinton, then the president, and he came out to do a press statement, and I think he might have been gently refreshed. He was certainly quite angry, and he came out and in Russian was berating members of the press, and the translator was dutifully to the other one, you have all been wrong again, kind of thing. Bill Clinton dealt with this as if it was a joke and started laughing. And this had the effect of making Boris Yeltsin start to laugh, and the press start to laugh, and everybody was okay. A quite toxic situation was made fun. Think about it, that invitation to play. Look, he doesn't really mean it. It's fine. This is actually another hilarious joke from Boris. But it worked. It absolutely worked. So that's a kind of a glimpse. I think a lot of what we mean by nuanced charm in adult behavior relates to how people can and do use laughter. What we found in terms of brain responses is you can see that priming reaction when people hear laughter. You can see the brain getting ready to join in when people hear laughter. Interestingly, we also find that that correlates with laughter understanding. So when you get ready to join in with laughter, it seems that it's not just you getting ready to laugh, actually seems to make you understand the laughter better. So maybe there is something really meaningful about joining in with laughter. It's speaking to aspects of this understanding. And because laughter and laughter understanding does seem to have such a long developmental trajectory, this means, of course, it's ripe for there to be things that affect that. So we know that in the rat literature, the more a rat is tickled when it's a baby, the more that rat will laugh when it's an adult. Now, I don't think anybody's going to let me stop people tickling their babies, but that's the kind of thing we'd like to know about. What kind of effect does your development and use of laughter in development have on your adult experience? Again, from the rats, and this may be good news or not for you, rats who laugh a lot are more optimistic rats. Now, I don't know if we want a world full of optimistic rats, but maybe we've got enough of those. But it does at least suggest from the basic science perspective that there could be some really important individual differences in adults and how they're using laughter and how that relates to their experience. The fifth lesson of laughter is that laughter is pretty much never about humour. The reason why that man was laughing on the BBC, although he didn't want to, was a terrible joke. The man who's in the studio with him had made a joke that involved the phrase, he'd said he had to jump over the wicket, and he knocked the wicket with his inner thigh. And the second man said he didn't quite get his leg over. Now, British, again, very sophisticated sense of humour. I can take you through why that's very funny. I mean, it's not. It's an absolutely terrible joke. And very quickly, they're not laughing in a way that's got anything to do with the joke. They're just laughing because they're both laughing. But actually, out there in the world, Interestingly, laughter is still not linked to humour as much as we think it would be. Now, I'm not saying we don't laugh at humour. I'm not an idiot. We definitely do laugh at humour, okay. But there's a fantastic scientist called Robert Provine who's been studying this scientifically, and he finds if you ask people, when do you laugh, they'll talk about comedy and humour and jokes. If you look at people and you observe them, what you find is it remains a social behaviour. People laugh when they're with other people. They're laughing in conversation, and actually, most of the time, in those conversations, people aren't laughing at jokes. People are laughing at statements like, yes, I will have another cup of coffee, or no, I might miss my bus. Things that are not intended to be funny. And that's because, in conversation, you're primarily laughing for these still reasons of social bonding. You're laughing to show the person that you're with that you know them, you like them. You're laughing to show that you agree with them, you understand them. They're laughing to try and get you to show that you agree with them, that you understand them. It's an extremely nuanced way of actually showing a lot of the emotional work of a conversation in a way that we interleave with the words that we're saying. And in fact, you can see people using laughter quite specifically to do things like cover embarrassment, to cover up pain, to cover up anger, to cover up sadness. So I greatly dislike crying. I don't like crying. And I will go to great lengths to avoid crying. And what I normally do is I will find a way to start laughing. And I'm absolutely masking another emotion with that. So these layers upon layers about why people laugh in interaction are almost never to do with jokes. In fact, Provine has found that at any one point in time, the person who laughs most in a conversation is the person who's talking. Because it's communicative, it's part of your communicative act. And this is why it is such an important social cue. And laughter is never neutral. Laughter is always meaningful. When you hear somebody laughing, we've found that your brain will try and work out why that person's laughing, even if it's not apparently anything to do with you. That's because there's always some meaning. If you hear somebody going, ha, 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 you think, oh, it's clearly a faked laugh, but why? Why are they doing that? Are they trying to cover up embarrassment? Are they trying to make somebody like them? All these different, like a hall of mirrors of interpretations behind laughter. You're always trying to work it out. And you're also, where is it in relation to you? Are they laughing at me? Are they laughing with me? It's, again, this hall of mirrors. You're trying to understand where you are, what the laughter means, what it means in relation to you. And just to link specifically to comedy, this social nature of laughter does seem to still link back to comedy. So what we find, if you give people a list of jokes and you ask them to rate how funny they are, people will rate jokes as funnier if they think they were told by somebody who is a comedian. So if you say Louis C.K. told this joke, people will rate it as funnier than if they think that Martha Stewart told the joke. Is she a comedian? I don't know. I'm trying to come up with American versions. I could get this wrong. So apologies to Martha Stewart if she's a very well-established comedian. So what this means is, even when we're making a decision about a joke, we're still using social information about the person who told it as part of our appreciation. We think jokes are funnier if they've been told by someone who has that role. They have the social position of comedian. They're the jester, they're the joker. They're allowed to do this. And I suspect that affection, that affiliation still comes in. So I'm struggling personally to think of a comedian who I find funny, who I don't also somehow think I like. If somebody makes me laugh, I tend to think, he's a great guy, or she's a great lady, and we'd probably be best friends if we just happened not to be me in the audience and them on the stage. You know, they kind of feel like a closeness almost. But it's that kind of direction. I think I like them because they've made me laugh. Maybe I was laughing to show that I like them. And that's what we do in conversation. Why do we like listening to people laughing? This is my 6th lesson about laughter. And I think that's because it's worth taking your laughter seriously. Your laughter matters. It's clearly a very important signal showing affection and affiliation. It's clearly a very nuanced social behavior that we can use to make interactions go a lot more smoothly. But there's amazing work coming out of Robert Levinson's lab in the US, where he takes married couples from the community, he gets them into the lab, and he wires them up to a polygraph. Now, polygraphs appear on crime television as a way of detecting lies. Actually, polygraphs are literally just things that take many measurements from your body. So you're measuring how sweaty someone's skin gets, how fast their heart beats, how their blood pressure changes, how their breathing changes. So you can see physical changes in the body associated with emotion. And he wires up both members of the couple, and he sits them down, and he makes them have a horrible conversation. He'll say to one member of the couple, "Tell me something your wife does that irritates you." So just take a second, run that one round your head. What would it feel like to say to the face of my partner something he does that irritates me? Obviously nothing. But that was nothing. So what you see, we can imagine that feels unpleasant. Physically, both members of the couple become stressed. You see their heart rate change. You see their breathing change. Their skin becomes more sweaty. They are feeling unpleasant consequences of stress. What Levinson has found is that couples who use positive emotion like laughter to deal with this difficult situation, and it is mostly laughter, they immediately both become less stressed. They get on top of that negative emotion with the laughter. And they're also the couples who tend to stay together for longer and are happier in their relationship. But the interesting thing is, it only works if both members of the couple do it. So if one person's going, yes, it's really irritating when I do that, isn't it? And the first person's going, it's a massive problem. No one feels better. Both members of the couple stay stressed. And what this means in practice is laughter isn't just this signal that we're sending to people to show them we like them, show them we are part of the same group as them, show them we understand them, we're kind of expressing all this at them. We actually can use laughter in close relationships, and I suspect that this is not limited to married relationships. I think this might be what we mean by friendship. We can use laughter to feel better together. You can negotiate your way out of an unpleasant emotional state into a positive emotional state using laughter. Now, I have to stress there are other ways you can use emotion to regulate an interaction. We've probably all met people who regulate emotional states using anger or dominance. There's always a bit more valenced. Somebody's trying to just bully you into submission. It's not the greatest feeling. Whereas laughter, that invitation to play, it's a very safe, emotional place to be. Let's go over here. Let's laugh about it. We're going to both feel better for that. And that is not, it's not that the happy couples are happy because they laugh a lot. The happy couples probably laugh a lot because they're happy. They're happy because they can use laughter in this way. The laughter is an index of the strength of the relationship rather than something that's just making them happier. And we tend to get this wrong with laughter We tend to hear our laughter and think it's telling us about other people, but often it's telling us about ourselves, probably because of this reason. So how many times have you thought, I really like so-and-so, they make me laugh, they've got a great sense of humour? What you mean is, I really, really like so-and-so, and I laugh a lot when I'm with him or her because I really like him, and I'm showing him with my laughter. We attribute it to people, whereas laughter is like an insight into our own emotional conditions. And also, has anybody here ever had the experience of like not really liking somebody and thinking they laugh really irritatingly? So I've got I have a relative who's, I always thought, oh, she laughs so inappropriately. Ah, ha, 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 ha. And I was like, oh, listen to her laughing. And when I started working on laughter, I started paying more attention to this. And it's not her at all. She's laughing completely normally. But when she laughs, I don't join in because I don't like her. So, and so it's literally nothing to do with her. It's everything to do with me. She's laughing completely normally. And I'm like, oh, I don't think we have that kind of relationship. And I blame her, and it's all me. Listen to your laughter. Who do you laugh with? When do you laugh? Do more of that. And finally, I think it's probably true that laughter, it can sound a lot like love. We think it's about jokes, and we think it's about comedy, and it is about jokes, and it is about comedy. But it's bigger than that. It's this incredibly ancient, inclusive social bond that will let you really transiently kind of just have a better interaction with someone that you might never meet again. But also with the people that you are close to, the people that you laugh with, that's a real sign of the closeness, the meaning of that relationship. So many years ago, when my dad was dying, he was very, very unwell. He thought he was dying. We all thought he was dying. Spoiler alert, he made it through this one, okay? He doesn't die at the end of this story. He was very, very ill, and we were all just sitting around at the hospital waiting for something to happen. And it got very quiet, and then he said, you know, we've laughed a lot, haven't we? And I wasn't working on laughter then, and I thought, that's a strange thing to say. But I think now he was absolutely right. There's not a lot that will be like a signifier throughout your life of love and closeness and emotional intimacy, but laughter's there all along with you, when you're with the people that you love. When you laugh with those people, that is a thing to value. That is a thing to look back on and say that was a life full of laughter, was a life well spent. And I think it really does mean yes, you're thank you. I think it really is time for science to start taking laughter seriously because it's everywhere. We are laughing all the time. We don't even notice we've done it. Every study that's looked at this, and there are very, very few studies that have looked at this, has found everybody underestimates how frequently they laugh. Every single person is laughing more than they think they are, because it's almost like a default state. Panksepp, the man who did the work with rats, also did a lot of work on play in children, and he said play for children is like the default state. It's what they'll do naturally unless something's wrong. And that means it's a useful index, because you can look at children and say they're not playing, what's gone wrong? And I suspect the same might be true for laughter and adults. It's in many ways, if everything's safe with the people we like, we're not feeling vulnerable, we're not feeling exposed, we will start laughing. And if that's not there, there's a reason. And I think scientifically, it really is time to start engaging with this. For too long in science, we've focused fully on negative emotions, to the extent to which there are thousands of papers just on the emotion of fear. And nothing wrong with fear, very important emotion. But there are 155 papers on the science of laughter, completely. And about 5 of those are by me, so I know about them. it's not enough, because it matters. And it matters because it's social, and it matters because it's an emotion. And I think it matters because it takes us into the heart of what makes humans really connect with other humans, which is when we are with other people and we are talking to them, because that is where we find laughter. It really is time to take it seriously. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie, very much. I just mentioned that there is nothing wrong with fear because we're going to talk about it next week, and I hope you'll all be here as we do so. Where else would you do comedy one week and fear the next? I have to return to something you mentioned very early in your speech, and while it may come across as humorous, I'm really interested in the answer. Why does somebody study rat vocalization?
He was actually looking initially at rat distress calls because that's fear. You know, it was a way of looking at fear behavior in rats. So that's why they were recording the rats, and that's when they noticed the rats made a completely different sound when they weren't frightened and when they were playing with each other.
A question from Twitter. How does alcohol affect laughter? He may be home drinking for all I know, but...
Alcohol is quite a complicated drug in its effects. Some of the effects of alcohol are quite stimulating. Other effects of alcohol are quite sedative. That's why one of the many and varied ways it can kill you is through the sedative effects. What it does do when you take it is it tends to reduce inhibition of behavior, and I suspect quite a lot of normal interactions involve you trying not to laugh at some degree, probably staying on top of uncontrollable laughter. So I suspect what alcohol does is it's actually removing some of these inhibitory processes and it making it more likely for people to laugh because of that.
Do dolphins laugh?
Well, I'm going to have to say probably yes. They're mammals, they're very social, they play a lot. The problem with laughter and other animals is literally no one's looking for it. We only know about the rats by accident, and we know about the other apes because it looks and sounds like our laughter. So I strongly suspect that there will be more mammal laughter out there, and I think dolphins are good candidates for that. I suspect dogs are very good candidates for that, but we may not be using the right measures to actually find it yet.
Why is there such a big difference between British humor and US humor?
What? Don't you like my toilet jokes? Oh no. The really interesting thing about humor is you can't find any one thing that is funny for everybody, everywhere, across time and place. So there are differences between US and UK humor, but even within the UK, there are very big differences in the sort of, it's not the case that everybody finds the same things funny. There's a very popular television program in the moment in the UK, which is going to blow your minds. It's called Mrs. Brown's Boys, and Mrs. Brown is a man dressed as a woman. It's just, how do they think of it? And Tom and I watched that once, and we just sat there going, what's going on? Because everything about it is screaming, Sophie, go away. This is not aimed at you. You will never find it funny. And this is actually, it's kind of true on an even bigger picture, because if you go back across time, as long as humans have been writing things down, and probably as long as humans have had language, of course, we don't know about words until they're written down. As long as there's any written record, you find people writing down jokes. There's an ancient Babylonian papyrus which contains a joke about how you get a pharaoh to go fishing. You get naked ladies wearing fishing nets. Ba-dum-tish. I mean, you probably had to be there, but the point is, it's got the structure of a joke, and you can kind of see where they're going with it, but it's just not funny to us anymore. And there's a whole book of Roman jokes called The Laughter Lover, which leans super heavily on crucifixion as a comic device. I mean, it's genuinely shocking. Goodness me, I would not have thought that that was a joke. But there was this joke so funny, people wrote them down. This is for the ages, And again, they've got the form and shape of a joke. They don't make us laugh now. And I think that's because the content of comedy varies across time and place, because that's what humans do. We don't all like the same music. We don't all want to read the same books. We don't all find the same stuff funny. It's an art form which we have an aesthetic response to, and in that, it's as variable as any other art form, I suspect.
This may be the same question, but let me ask it. Can you say something about how culture and laughter intersect?
Well, there are some very interesting, but if we take a step back from comedy for just a second, so comedy varies a lot over time, over place. We've established that laughter is cross-culturally recognized. All human cultures know what laughter is, as far as we can determine it, and people can recognize laughter cross-culturally. You still get cultural differences in how laughter can be used. So, for example, it's not at all unusual in some Far East countries, Thailand, parts of the Philippines, for people to react to very bad news, and I mean really bad news, with laughter. And the laughter doesn't mean everything's fine. The laughter means this is a severe situation, and I'm laughing to mark the severity. And that can be genuinely shocking to people from the West, because it feels like people are laughing at something that's very serious, and they're making it trivial, and they're not. They're laughing to show how severe it is. It's not unusual for children in Japan, when they're being told off, to start laughing. And it's not because they're turning it into a joke, it's because they're recognizing the severity. So you still get this cultural variation. As with everything, you're seeing variation, and it can be hard to see within your culture. Everybody sort of thinks we laugh about the right amount here, now, and everybody else is odd. But it's actually just different cultures. So in lots of parts of Japan, it's very rude to laugh in a work environment. I give a very boring talk on speech perception, okay, and I was asked to give it in Japan, and I have a joke about halfway through, just out of pity, really, for the audience, because it's a very boring talk. And when I did it in Japan, the audience reacted, but they didn't laugh because it would have been rude. So it's like an acknowledgement kind of went round, but laughter would have been inappropriate. And so you do get big differences, even just in how laughter is used.
To look at another part of the world, when McDonald's opened in Moscow, it had to train employees to smile because Russians do not smile very much.
Yes. It's actually another example I've heard quite a lot anecdotally from people in the UK who've gone to work in Russia. They're considered to be idiotic frequently because they're considered to smile too much and laugh too much.
Again, from Twitter, my dad used to say laughing at your own joke is a cardinal sin. Do you agree, or was he just annoyed at us laughing at bad jokes?
I think one of the things that's really interesting about the performance of comedy is the sort of tells comedians do to let you know that it's okay to laugh. Because stand-up comedy is a relatively new art form, and we have gone through it quite quickly, and people don't do the kind of ba-dum-tish anymore, but So it's not at all unusual in the UK for someone to be telling a joke on stage and then say, and that's why I'll never have a pet owl. And sort of they're kind of not actually, you know, they're saying you can laugh now because I've stopped to take a drink. But laughing, showing, I mean, Louis C.K. actually does that a lot. He leaks laughter when he gets to the punchline of a comment. So it can be a way for professionals to be indicating now is the time that we're going to coordinate this behaviour. I'd say probably it's all right to laugh at your own jokes if you reframe it as a performative device.
What chemical changes take place in the body, and could these chemicals cause better health?
So you get an immediate change in an uptake of endorphins when you've been laughing, even if you completely fake the laughter. So even if you just go, ha, 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 you get a measurable change actually in pain thresholds, because endorphins are the body's naturally circulating painkillers. That seems to be linked to exercise. So it's the exact same pain threshold change that you get if you went out and ran for a couple of minutes. And that's because you don't go mad. You don't do that much exercise when you're laughing, but you do a certain amount of exercise at your rib cage, and that seems to be what's giving you this change of endorphins. So you feel good when you've been laughing, and you can tolerate pain better. You also get a reduction in adrenaline, and adrenaline is that fight or flight hormone that makes you get very roused and up. That goes down, so you are relaxed when you've been laughing. And over a longer time scale, you get a reduction in cortisol levels, and cortisol is a stress hormone. It's the thing that wakes you up in the morning, and it's the reason why sometimes when you wake up you can feel a bit awful. That's cortisol working. And then when you're very stressed, you tend to run at high levels of cortisol. Laughter brings that down. What we don't know is for the adrenaline and the cortisol, if that's to do with laughter or if it's to do with the situations in which you will laugh. Because people, as I know to my cost studying laughter in the lab, people won't just turn up and start laughing. People will only laugh in certain circumstances with certain people. So it's hard to disentangle the social benefits that are affecting these stress responses from the specific laughter effects.
Are you familiar with laughter yoga? If so, what do you think of it?
Well, laughter yoga builds on this fact that laughter primes laughter. So people will laugh more when they've been laughing. And in fact, it's not unusual in laughter yoga for it to start with completely fake laughter. I mean, I went to one, the guy actually had a script that said, ho, 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 ha, ha, ha. And he would go, ho, ho, ho. We all went, ho, 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 ha, 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 ha. And I was just thinking, what is this? And within a couple of minutes, several people had really started to laugh. They say, you fake it till you make it. And that really works for some people. There seems to be two completely different groups of people. Some people really, really get into it, really get the laughter going and find themselves absolutely helplessly laughing by the end of this very fake start. Other people actually show spikes in cortisol and get really stressed out. And I'm one of those. I got a migraine and I wanted to hit someone by the end of it. And I don't think that's what they were going for. So it works amazingly well for people that like it. It really is extraordinary for people that like it.
Two questions. One that talks about the effect of comedy on autism, comedy in autistic children, laughter in autistic children, and also a question about someone who had Down syndrome. And laughter upset her because she couldn't understand what was funny. Could you speak about those issues?
It's certainly the case that neurotypical people's laughter, that means people who haven't got some sort of developmental problem or acquired a problem in adulthood, their laughter, our laughter, can be highly confusing to people who have been presented with more challenges. So children with autism laugh, but they find a lot of neurotypical laughter completely incomprehensible because people just seem to do it at strange comments and at strange times, and very often when there's nothing funny happening at all. So it's definitely not the case that you've got an absence of laughter or an appreciation of laughter in children with autism, but it's reflecting the social difficulties that they have engaging with neurotypical communication is made particularly manifest when they're confronted with neurotypical laughter, which can just seem completely random. And I'm not at all surprised to hear about the experience of somebody with Down syndrome finding it disturbing, because again, it can just be genuinely alarming and surprising and happening. There don't seem to be any rules that govern it if you're just confronted with it happening. And it is quite a primal, extreme response. People really laughing. It can be, if you don't understand why or what's happening, I can absolutely understand that it's not just confusing, but it's actually upsetting.
Is nervous laughter really laughter?
I think that there's probably at least two sorts of nervous laughter. I think sometimes nervous laughter is quite ordinary laughter that nobody else is joining in with. So my relative going, ha ha ha, ha, and me going. Her laughter ends up sounding nervous because it's on its own. If somebody else joined in with it, it would just be laughter. I can think of another example when a very, very famous American scientist visited London, and we took him for a drink, and he tipped an entire pint of water all over me outside a pub. I mean, literally, none of it missed me. And he was going, oh, it's only water, ha ha ha. And I was going, I think I'll be the judge of that. And his laughter was indeed nervous. He was right to be nervous. I was quite cross. I think there's also, a slightly more distressing version of that, which is when people really are nervous and they try to use laughter to reframe what's going on. So there was a couple of narratives from women who'd been exposed to quite severe sexual harassment at work that came out last year in the US. And these women had all worked at the same company, and several of them told a story which was very similar because the man doing it had quite a formal way of making these suggestions to women. And several of them, when he'd made his initial comments, had reacted with laughter. Because, again, think back to that invitation to play. I mean, can I reframe this highly unpleasant and unsettling interaction as, oh, you don't really mean it. This is all just jokes, isn't it? With the laughter. And of course, that's very difficult because he can then go away from that and say, well, they were fine, they were laughing. It was all good. You know, it's a very double-edged sword, nervous laughter. I think sometimes it really is somebody truly nervously trying to make things okay with laughter, and that doesn't necessarily stop anybody from continuing to do bad things.
My husband laughs in his sleep. Is this normal?
Yes. I think that's absolutely brilliant. Wouldn't it? I love to wake up having been laughing. That's great. Keep laughing, husband.
Will true laughter ever be incorporated into artificial intelligence?
Ooh, good question. I think the thing that we never really confront with artificial intelligence is that when you look at human intelligence, any one of us in this room is the product not just of our amazing brains, but of years and decades of experience. And if you think back to those babies, learning what laughter means, learning how their parents' laughter means, learning to want to make their parents laugh, that's kind of thing that's in place before they're talking to anybody. That kind of motivation is a social motivation that's then, you know, colouring and running through all the other things you're learning in your life. So I think the problem with AI is if it doesn't have that kind of developmental background, if you just got intelligence out of the box, it would be very hard to say why that would be important. And it would be very hard, possibly to simply program it in. So it might be easier to think of that as something that helps with AI if AI was something that learnt the way that we learn.
Can you speak to the effect of canned laughter in a situation comedy as a social cue, and talks about Seinfeld as opposed to no canned laughter, Curb Your Enthusiasm?
It's a very interesting sort of cultural phenomenon because it comes in an attempt to do that. Laughter leads to laughter, and laughter happens in interaction. So people used canned laughter initially to try and make it sound, for somebody who might be watching at home, like this is something you could laugh at because other people are laughing. And you can see over history, recent history, TV programs that were recorded with a live audience, so the laughter was not canned, would quite often tell you, this is filmed in front of a live studio audience. So you knew that laughter wasn't just somebody switching a sound on and off, that was really happening. And in fact, Friends, I think very famously, did a live dress rehearsal with an audience, and then they would shift jokes around depending on when the audience had laughed to kind of really make the most of that. So it's something that clearly matters to an audience and matters enough that people try and add it in and try and tell you when it's not canned, but it can be very aversive. So I think famously MASH was shown here with canned laughter, and in the UK it was shown without it. And it's almost like two different programs. But even then you get these big changes. When The Office came in the UK and it didn't have a laughter track, it was absolutely revolutionary. And a lot of comedy since then, and like Curb Your Enthusiasm, you didn't need to use laughter. And it can now be quite strange to go back to programs where you didn't even notice there was laughter before, canned or not. But now it looks like the sort of program that shouldn't have a laughter track, but it does. So there's a cultural element to this as well. It's not just a bit of canned laughter will make people join in. Our tastes vary with time.
Is there research about whether socially and economically disadvantaged people laugh less or more?
It's a very good question. I wouldn't be surprised if, and I'm afraid I have to refer back to the rat literature here, but rats don't laugh if they're frightened and they're vulnerable and they're exposed. You can't just jump in on a rat and make that rat laugh. And I suspect the same is true of humans. We don't laugh if we're uncomfortable. We don't laugh if we're scared, truly scared, or we feel exposed, vulnerable. It's not a behavior we'll go into easily. So you could imagine that if people were living more difficult lives, more stressed lives, perhaps just without the time for there be that space for laughter or the kind of interactions that would lead to laughter, that it could be falling by the wayside. But I suspect it would be a result of other larger things that are impacting on their life.
Why can't we tickle ourselves?
Just depends how long your feather is, I think. Actually, there is real science behind this, okay? When you sense things in the world, when you touch things or things touch you or you hear things or you say things, signals that are generated by you, your brain discounts. So when I'm talking, the brain areas that would normally listen to other people's voices are actually turned off because it's me talking. I know what I'm going to say. My brain doesn't care about my words. And the same is true for touch. So if I touch my hand, I get less of a response in the brain areas that care about touch than if somebody else was to touch my hand, because it matters much more if someone else has done it. It's more meaningful. I need to know about that. I know about me. And that seems to be why we cannot tickle ourselves, because we always know it's us. That's why we need a long feather.
What is the relationship of laughter to smiling? We smile a lot more and longer than we laugh.
We do, and that's probably because smiling isn't only associated with laughter. So we'll smile for joy, smile with relief, smile because we're feeling proud, feeling physically comfortable. Paul Ekman, who is the fantastic scientist behind a lot of this work on emotional expressions, says that happiness, which is conveyed with a smile, probably conveys a lot more emotions in more complex ways, but you could still call it all a smile. And then within that, some of that might be laughter, or there might be other specific things, but probably more generally, smiling is just a more wide, it's covering a wider span of emotions.
What studies of laughter during learning have been done at scale? How is the control group instructed?
Well, I think I can tell you rather disappointingly, I suspect very, very few have been done because, and I cannot emphasize this enough, there are very, very few scientific studies of laughter. So we don't know if people learn more if they're laughing. We don't know if people learn less if they're laughing. We just don't know. We need the studies.
If laughter is developed through social interaction, how detrimental is today's obsession with devices for our youth?
It's a very good question, and you can actually see, as we've got, so empirically, and Robin Dunbar in the UK has done this study, if you look at people having conversations, they laugh more, talk for longer, and are happier if they've had a face-to-face conversation, even if that's on a screen, it could be Skype or in the room, it's longer, more laughter, happier from face-to-face than if it's just auditory. So it goes down, less laughter, shorter conversation, less happy after a phone conversation, and then lowest of all for just text. And you can see people trying to find ways of putting laughter back into text. People write lol, or heh, or actual laughter, or rufflecopter, all sorts of different things to try and indicate. Often, if you find yourself writing it, you're often not laughing. You're saying, I would be laughing if you were here, is kind of what you're saying. So, it's something people are negotiating, but at the moment, nothing is quite replacing the social information. The more social information you have, seeing and hearing somebody is when you get most laughter.
Given what you've said about the lack of research, I think I know what the answer may be, and therefore you may take this as an assignment. Is there a book for the layperson on laughter and society?
Robert Provine has written books, and I am also writing a book. So please hold on to that thought that there will be a book. I promise you at some point. Thank you.
And thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Sophie Scott.